able to join us.
All right. So we've got about a minute before we start, y'all. So we'll give us a little bit more time to get in. We had some great registrants, or registrant numbers. So we're excited to have a good group and hopefully a very collaborative conversation today. All right, everyone. Well, it is officially 4 o'clock. So on behalf of the Southeastern School Behavioral Health Community and the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina, I am Taylor Davis, Program Manager for BASC, and we would like to welcome y'all to this month's national webinar. Before I turn it over to our friend and BASC family member, Dr. Patricia Motes, just wanted to share with y'all a little bit of housekeeping. We are going to have a pre-survey poll that I will launch momentarily, as well as a post-survey poll. And we hope that you all engage with that so that we can ensure that our content is accommodating to all of our community members and that we know a little bit about y'all to help out with the presentation. Also, Dr. Motes has requested that you all put your minds to the grindstone today and please populate any questions that you have in our chat feature. I will pop up and field any of those questions to Dr. Motes throughout the presentation. Moreover, if you are joining us on Facebook Live, please by all means put your questions or comments in the lower half, and I will make sure that Dr. Motes is able to respond to you as we go through our presentation today. So without further ado, I am so proud, so privileged to introduce Dr. Patricia Motes. Dr. Motes is an incredible advocate, a key core guiding member of the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina, and provides direct intensive support and coaching to our Realm 3 BASC districts. So Dr. Motes, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and sharing your screen, I will populate the pre-survey poll. And once that is completed, we'll go ahead and hear from you. So we've got some folks chiming in here on the poll. It's 3 questions. We're looking at what role best describes you, a little bit more about our community today, so that Dr. Motes can really target our conversations. So Tricia, it looks like we've got some parents and caregivers, district personnel, some teachers with us today, some college students, a few professors. Let's see here. And we've got mental health professionals with us today. So we've got a great, very diverse representation of roles around community engagement and involvement. I'll give y'all just a couple more seconds. There seems to be a good comfortability with the topic and also an excitement of learning a bit more. Okay, so I'm going to end our poll now and turn it over to our presenter today, Dr. Patricia Motes. Thank you so much, Dr. Motes. We look forward to learning from you.
Super. Thank you, everybody. Let's get started. Tilly, you know, I'm a little nervous that my slides aren't up there, but I guess they are. So let's get started. The webinar really today, what I want to do is talk about really how can we promote, why promote and how to promote positive school, family, community engagement. So I'm glad Taylor said that those that are part of the webinar today already have a pretty good level of knowledge around family, school, and community engagement, because that will help me, because I was hoping that what we could do today would be having some co-learning activity. Also, because there's so much going on right now, actually, now that Ukraine has been invaded by Russia, there's more anxiety in the country, but already COVID-19, lots of racial reckoning, lots of political polarization. And so really, I'm wondering whether or not those things have enhanced or hindered our efforts to reach out to community members, to families, to engage with our schools. So let's get started. I really want this to be an interactive discussion. My style of presenting is definitely not one of being on Zoom. I'm much more comfortable sitting in a room with a small group of folks, perhaps in a semicircle where we can talk together. So I hope that you will use the chat to talk with me so that I don't think that I'm the only person on Zoom call. So let's start with why focus on school, family, community engagement, especially at this moment in time?
Folks, if you could please respond and put your prompts or your responses to the question in the chat, and I will make sure that Dr. Motes is able to engage with you. That question again, why focus on school, family, community engagement, especially at this moment? So Dr. Motes, we've got some folks chiming in here. We say ease trauma because our students and families are in need. Their voices need to be heard and valued through engagement. Additionally, we've got some responses that are stating to us, we need everyone's support and everyone involved. Definitely need support from everyone due to COVID-19 going on these past years to repair communities and relationships that were disrupted by COVID. Really beautiful and thoughtful responses so far, guys. Students need to feel as though they have support from the adults in their lives to include family voice and community voice. It helps focus on the whole student. Kids who are connected feel safe, secure, supported, and ready to learn.
Great, great. Those are all great. Okay. Well, we can continue. People can continue to add because I'm going to have lots of questions throughout. So let me thank you for those responses and what the research offers here, not in particular this moment in time. So I particularly appreciate folks pointing out that right now there's really a greater need in many instances for us to reach out. People talk in general about students feeling comfortable, families feeling at ease, easing trauma. So issues like school climate. But these are some of the selected research findings. Just no citation here because almost any site that you pull up or reference that you pull up, you're going to find some of these reasons why it's important to have positive engagement between the school, the family, and the community. From school achievement to general engagement in school to the climate issues, even things such as the reputation of the school is important. Family engagement in terms of attitudes and the resources that the community brings to the school. So some of the responses that I heard kind of fit within these, particularly around attitudes, climate issues, and others that fit there. Any thoughts before I move forward in terms of because my question specifically was about engagement at this moment, and it seems like that really kind of fit well with the responses that you offered, whereas these are more general responses around the research findings around school engagement. So before I move forward, if there are other comments that might show up in the chat, I'll take about 10 seconds just in case there's something else that people wanted to say before I move forward. Okay, so we're good. We're going to move forward then. So here's a definition that I really like around school engagement. And I want you to take time to read it. So let's take about a minute to actually read this definition. It's from Ferguson, Jordan, and Baldwin, their work, Working Systemically in Action, Engaging Family and Community. It is a document that's available on the CETL website, and I think it's a great definition. So take a minute to read that definition, and then we'll continue. Okay, so hoping everybody's gotten through the definition. So what I want is, having read that definition, what is there one word or phrase from this definition that stands out to you that's really important or confusing or anything that stands out in this definition? I'm going to place the definition back on the screen, and then hopefully there'll be some comments that will come in the chat to talk about kind of what stands out in this definition.
We've already got folks replying, Tricia. We've got
great.
career.
I'm sorry, did you say, you said lots of folks, people were responding.
Yes, cradle to career, creation of pathways, honor, shared responsibility, support with an exclamation point. Again, shared responsibility seems to be resonating with the team today. Support / creation of pathways, educational quality, advocating.
Okay. Well, I love it that people have at least things are standing out. So actually, I probably don't know. See, this is why I like sitting in a room with folks as opposed to being on Zoom. So I don't really know if that means that you agree with those things that you're highlighting, or those things are confusing, or maybe you don't even think they ought to be in the definition. So if there are a few other comments that kind of clarify, since I can't talk to you directly around the room, I'll wait a couple more seconds on that, and then I'll tell you what I think about a few things.
They are saying, I agree with them. Love the cradle to career.
Okay, super, great. All right, so here's kind of my summary of that definition, and I've highlighted the two things that really stand out for me, things that I think are so critical around engagement, is that if it's done well, then every child is academically successful, and that there should be quality education, learning opportunities for every child, which obviously connects. But I like every bit of the definition. I like the shared responsibility for learning, that it's not just the school's responsibility, and it's not just the family. And yeah, there is a role for the community too, that every child ought to be succeeding, not just some children in certain neighborhoods, but everybody ought to be succeeding. And that it is lifelong learning, that there's roles. If you think of the school, the family, and the community, surely there's a role across from birth to career for everybody to have a role. Multiple pathways to learning. That learning occurs everywhere, and that we ought to be thinking about that. There should be advocacy for learning because it does occur everywhere. And that again, my bold highlights is, that the opportunities ought to be there for everybody. So those are my thoughts. And okay, so y'all are, now that I'm looking at my own slides without talking to you all in person, let's see if there are more comments or anything regarding this definition as I kind of offer up some other questions that come up, which you can or cannot respond to, it's okay. But just based on that definition, do we feel like that everybody is getting some equitable, that kids are all benefiting from school, family, community engagement? And again, back to this notion around kind of what the world that we're living in right now. But honestly, the biggest thing that I want and hope that you will comment about is that, because I'm guessing that if you join this webinar, that you are interested in having good school, family, community engagement. And as a person who's very committed to this work, I also know that it can be challenging at times to do that. So I really want us to talk about kind of some of the challenges, some of the facilitators, what's helping us and what's harming us, what's getting in the way. And then we'll talk more as we go through that. But any comments around any of these, but particularly around if you find it challenging or you find it pretty easy to make this happen. And I think Taylor said that when you all did your quick survey that you all had a pretty comfortable level of knowledge around school family engagement. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So Tricia, we've got folks saying, especially around the first curiosity, the first one is a no, not all children are benefiting. Sadly, no, we need more equitable practice in family and school community engagement. No, I do not feel that all children are benefiting. No, because some don't have family to support them at all, or those that even care. Lack of family and disruption to community are some.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I agree that everybody isn't benefiting equitably. There are definitely challenges in terms of the shared responsibility for education, for support. There are lots.
We've also got some feedback here on a lot of misinformation is being spread, and it causes children to miss out on great learning opportunities, and that the diverse mindsets of what should and should not happen during COVID has hindered this engagement. So created a disconnect and a connectedness that we hope to have with the community and families.
Yeah, so in many ways, COVID has opened up some things, and in many ways, it's also harmed some things. Obviously, we know that education has been harmed during this period of COVID, but also I'm wondering, in my own personal kind of connections with schools and communities that, and talking with friends of mine who are educators, is that this process of seeing inside of people's homes that happened during COVID was very eye-opening for many folk who thought they had appreciation for what their kids' lives were like and the resources that were available to them. So again, lots of things that have caused people to think differently in a positive way and perhaps in a negative way, we don't know. So I want to go to my next slide, which really is based in some research findings in terms of what people see as what the research supports in terms of barriers or challenges to effective engagement, which of course were some of the comments that you offered as well, that attitudes and beliefs and behavior about family, but also the attitudes, beliefs about from the school perspective in terms of, I think someone commented about kind of the lack of family support or lack of family. I'm not sure exactly now what the comment was. And so that might be an attitude from the school side, but from the family side, the family might think that the school doesn't care. So there's just lots of attitudes on both sides. Issues of trust is a big issue on the family side. And honestly, I wonder if COVID helped or harmed in this issue on trust in terms of family members who perhaps had been private about things that maybe because of COVID and because of how virtual instruction occurred, that they may be more trusting or less trusting, I don't know. Values, the differences between the school values and family values. Just logistical considerations, and then specific, for example, what time are meetings held? Are families available? Are there resources to allow them to be available? What are the expectations from the school? Does the school expect, the school has rules about when you show up? Families may be available at certain times and don't necessarily know that they need to get permission from the principal before they can do certain things. So just lots of things. Skills might be a big issue on both sides. Skills from the school in terms of how to reach out to families, how to be engaging. Most educators do not have a major kind of educational background in terms of building these family, school family, community engagements and partnerships. What are the skill set of families when we ask families to support us around certain activities for their children? What are their skills and their ability to do that we're asking of them? So lots of challenges to effective engagement on both sides, particularly for the family and from the school, that there are challenges. You know, do teachers really want to do after school activities? Do teachers really want to do home visits? Do families really want home visits? So there's just lots of challenges there. But I think what we want to focus more on is how can we facilitate effective engagement? So that definition that I offered came from the CETL working systematically in action, engaging family and community, a 2010 publication from CETL. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as an engagement strategy. Joyce Epstein's work was the first framework that I had around involvement. And actually, I got to know her work in the mid-90s, just as I was beginning to work in the school mental health community engagement kind of arena. And her work is still relevant today, newest publication in 2019. And her early work focused specifically around parental involvement. Her work now is much more engaging across family, school, and community. And then I want to highlight and talk a little bit about the South Carolina Family Engagement K-12 framework that many of you that are in education may be aware of this, others outside of that arena, which I understood from the description of who was present, may not be aware that South Carolina Department of Ed actually has a family engagement framework that they offer. And then ultimately, actually, I'm not sure if I even said again when I started, but what I really want to do ultimately is kind of use that a lens around cultural responsiveness to kind of help us think about how we do engagement. And so I'm going to use a framework on cultural responsiveness from PBS, Positive Behavior Intervention Supports, to kind of help guide that discussion. So that's where we're going to go, kind of spend a little bit of time talking about kind of three primary approaches specifically around engagement, and then the cultural responsive lens as a way to kind of build across all three of the earlier ones. Again, as I kind of go here, feel free to interrupt if you need to. So back to the definition that we offered earlier and kind of the basics kind of framework that Ferguson, Jordan, and Baldwin and the folk at CETL offered to us is that in order to do effective engagement, we need to shift from individual a mindset of individual responsibility to support student learning to a shared responsibility throughout the local system. That again, kind of as I was going through the definition, that it is not one source that is responsible for the outcomes that we're looking for when we talk about family school engagement. We're talking about student achievement, student engagement, positive attitudes about school. It's not on any one group of folks. It's not a deficit-based or adversarial approach to interaction. We need to, this approach is saying we need to stop blaming each other. It's not that the parents don't care or that the schools don't care. We really need to look for the strengths within everyone and how we can collaborate together. It is not an add-on. You know, sometimes we say we want to engage folk and then we ask them to do something. We ask them to volunteer, which is a great thing, or we ask them to support come in and do a class reading. Those are all great things. But if we really want true engagements that's systemic, that's long lasting, as it says here, sustained, continuous, then it has to be integrated throughout, not one shot. And it can't be compliance driven. You know, it's like Title I will require that there be some parent involvement in a Title I school. And so we have a parent liaison, perhaps. Maybe you get some funding from a community foundation and they say that there has to be some community partner. And so we get a community partner. But if you really want this systemic effort that's going to involve the school, the family, and the community all working together, it really has to be a shared ownership. It has to be that we really want everyone at the table, everyone working together, and that we're not enemies, that we really are all in this together to get to the kind of outcomes that we want for every child. Okay, I need a breather, so here's my breathing space. So if you have any comments or thoughts about any of that, please share.
So we've already got folks coming on board here. It says we've got it takes a village. So we definitely need teamwork. think on my end, Tricia, one thing that I was reflecting on was the importance of having, compassionate and collaborative leaders in this area, that can help with that sustainability, that really believe and value this critical choice and voice. We've got supportive and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Echoing Dr. Motes, partnerships are not an add-on. So that really hit home.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So I think so you'll feel this, I think, as I continue to go through this presentation, that this is kind of an area that I'm pretty passionate about. So I'll probably say the same thing over and over, but hopefully it will be things that matter in terms of commitment to doing this work. So again, I'm not trying to go through every of these many different programmatic approaches or frameworks, because they're available. Some of them very detailed with very step-by-step suggestions. For example, Joyce Epstein's approach, her work has, as does the seal that we just, there's a whole volume that will give you all details, opportunities to do surveys, ways to reach out. Same with Epstein's work. So there's lots of things and resources available to us to help us do this. But I think, as Taylor was offering, and as that earlier slides talked about, challenges that we, the doers, whether we're a parent, whether we're a student, whether we are a community member, whether we are school staff, educator, whatever our role is, we have to really believe that these things matter. And if these things matter, then the steps become easier to commit to doing. So again, Joyce Epstein offers 6 types of school family community engagements, not that one is better than the other, or that they're a hierarchy necessarily, that they're kind of all the things that make a difference as we try to reach out and get parents involved. So those 6: parenting, communicating, volunteering, learning at home, decision-making, collaborating with the community. And I think if we took her 6 steps and layered it to that definition that we started, I think we could see that everything she's saying is not different. And that's what I like about these frameworks that I've pulled to share today, is that I think they all basically are saying the same thing. They're giving guidance. And if you pull one that fits better with your style of work or your ways of doing, then you've got good directions to do it. So just briefly, we're going to go through the steps, and again, know that I'm open to comments as we go. So parenting, help all families establish home environments to support children as students. So this is something that a school could offer to families, but also to create home environments to support children as students really is more than kind of parenting skills, but it could be that. But also I think it includes things like housing, healthcare, safety. And of course, as we now learn, it includes, making sure that they've got access to the internet. I am still struggling, with and I'm happy that kids are back in school. A family of 3 kids in 3 different grades trying to be on 3 different machines that don't exist. So lots of things that I think we learned about the challenges of parents with lesser resources. Communicating, again, how we communicate, school to home, home to school. Are we just asking them to give us information to fill out these paperwork for us as a school? Or are we sharing with them information that matters to families, perhaps specifically what's going on with my kid that's going well, as well as the challenges? Again, these are not kind of new things. These are just basic things that facilitate kind of this corporate way of looking at engagement. Schools are very good at asking for volunteering, but then we have to think about, how do we work to get a diversity in our volunteers? Everybody can't be a school mom, a classroom mom, or the dad that reads on certain days. but are there ways that we can involve family members in volunteer roles that are atypical? Volunteer roles that could happen outside of school, volunteer roles, but also volunteering. On the flip of this is that how do schools help communities by volunteering? Learning at home, again, this is probably a skill set that schools, how do we help a family learn how to help their children with their homework? How do we do that? Decision-making. Again, and I think I've alluded to this before, that, how do we ask parents to help us? Do we just ask them to give us information, or do we actually want them to be a part of decision-making in our school? We asking them to join the school improvement council, but when their input isn't being considered, are we giving them authentic roles of involvement? Again, these strategies or frameworks here that Joyce Epstein offers are all ways that we can do what we need to do to build that partnerships. And finally, this collaborating with community. Again, schools are very good at reaching out to get business partners, but what are we doing to build connections back to the community? Are there ways that our kids are involved in community activities that strengthen the community? Are our school leaders involved in things that the community offers? We ask the community come in for our fall festival, but do we support the community when they're having bigger fundraising events that benefit the larger community? Again, this is a quick overview of Joyce Epstein's work. Again, not trying to go into the rich details of any of these frameworks, but just offering that there's lots of information out there for us, and the commitment is on our part to do the work. So again, I'm going to next talk about the South Carolina framework, the Department of Ed's framework on engagement. So are there any comments or thoughts before I move forward?
So Tricia, we had one comment before that is salient to this conversation, that others during these times and any time is very important. So that bi-directional support that you were reflecting on, from the community to the schools, from the schools to the community, is a really critical element.
Great, thanks. Okay, so let's look at the Department of Education's Family Engagement K-12 framework, which they issued in March 2019. Prior to that, they also had a framework that they call parental involvement. And again, that's kind of been the trend over the years, has been that we have moved from everything being the parent involvement to that it is how do, that it's the whole of the family, it's also the community, it's kind of a broader approach. So this comes from this probably is more like the vision of this work. Families are actively involved in the learning and development of all students to become college and career ready. So before I kind of go into kind of sharing a little bit of details, I'm wondering on the group that's here, since I think from the description earlier, not as many educators as there are folks from maybe other supportive roles. Are folks familiar with the Department of Ed's framework? Is that something that's been discussed in your kind of where you're located in supporting schools, families, and community?
So we got a couple confirmations on, yes, this is something that they are familiar with.
Cool, great. Okay, so the South Carolina, this framework is built on this profile of the South Carolina graduate, that world-class knowledge, skills, and characteristics that support life and career. And again, I won't go through kind of rich discussions on this, but obviously language arts and maths, as well as technology skills, arts, etc. Skills creativity, innovation, critical thinking and problem solving, communication, information, media and technology, and learning how to learn, which is absolutely my favorite of all the world skills to have, is learning how to learn. And then life and career characteristics, integrity, interpersonal skills, work ethic, etc. And here then are the engagement strategies that Department of Ed offers: building relationships, communication, linking families to learning outcomes, collaborative practice, and community partnerships. So again, sounds very familiar. And again, my point again is simply to offer that you don't have to work hard to find resources to support you. Whether you do the CETL work, whether you do Joyce Epstein, or just look at your South Carolina Department of Education family engagement strategies, they're all pretty much saying the exact same thing, and they all have guidance and directions and strategies to do this work. Building relationships, mutual respect, cultivating trust, value, and diversity. Communication, two-way communication, multiple approaches and methods, clear and ongoing, that everybody is not going to read a newsletter, everybody's not going to go on the internet. Some folks need stuff that come in the mailbox, some folks need stuff that you call them on the telephone and talk with them. They need things coming to them, but they also need information that the school will receive and use. Linking families to learning outcomes, shared responsibilities, that there needs to be some processes in place so we understand how the school expects us to do things, but also the learning that's necessary to facilitate me knowing how to do the things that the school might be asking of me. Collaborative partnership, reciprocal learning, strength-based. Community partnerships, mutual commitments, and ongoing. So I kind of rushed through that largely because I guess my whole premise here is to say that we actually know how to do community engagement. We know how to engage with schools. We know those things. And if we need resources to augment what we know already or what we challenged with, then there are multiple resources that are very readily available to us to help us do that work. So any comments about the Department of Ed's approach, Joyce Epstein's, or the CETL approach, any of these approaches, any comments about kind of that there are structures in place, strategies in place, and resources in place to help us do this work that I think we're committed to doing.
We'll give folks just a moment to respond here. So any reflections on any of the frameworks or resources that Dr. Motes has shared? You know, Tricia, it's very valuable, especially in this day and age, or in any day and age, when we're so inundated with work and our schedules feel so very busy, and there's so many different action items, to know that there are tools and resources available that can help us to facilitate. We don't have to reinvent a wheel, but more
exactly.
Of practice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. All right, so now we move into kind of the final section, which is really just thinking about the importance, you know, as all of these strategies are there, but I want to encourage us to really look at it through a cultural lens so that we are promoting diversity, inclusion, and equity, that we're not simply, you know, what I know as a community member is that it's very easy to get certain families, including my family, to volunteer. And I know that it's more challenging to get my niece's family. But the goal is that we all need to be a part of it. And how do we reach out and support? And what I do might be different from my niece, but there's roles for all of us. And the importance of looking at that as we try to figure out ways to really facilitate this engagement. So as I said, this last part comes largely from the cultural responsiveness field guide that comes from PBIS. And this field guide, which encourages people to think about the work that they're doing in schools through a cultural lens, and I'm using it to say, think about how you reach out to do family, school, and community engagement from a cultural lens. And they offer 5 core components: identity, voice, supportive environment, situational appropriateness, and data for equity. And okay, I'm looking at the time. So recognize and valuing the multiple aspects of identity. And I think this is kind of very core for me, is when you in your role, whatever it might be, whether you're a mental health professional, an educator, or agency director, or a professor at a university, what are we bringing to the table when we try to engage others, whether we're engaging students, family members, or community members? What is it that we're bringing to the table? You know, for me, I know that when I sit at any table, I know that I'm bringing the fullness of me. And while, you know, immediately people recognize me as a Black woman, but what I know I always bring to the table with me is that I am one of 9 children, neither parent with a high school diploma. I'm number 7 of these 9 children. Despite my parents not being educated in a formal way, they were very, very strong components of the value and the importance of education. And my mom would particularly say, you get it in your head and no one can take it away from you. And so when I sit at any table where we're talking about families, communities, et cetera, then I know that that is there for me. And so I'm thinking from this lens of everybody at the table is not just like me, that there is not a universal thing, that I don't represent everybody. There are different ways of thinking. And that's kind of, for me, an important way to start this work around family school engagement, is that you bring certain things and other people bring certain things. And the willingness to begin to acknowledge that there are those differences, that's important to helping us understand how we move forward doing this work. So recognizing these and valuing these multiple aspects of our identity, again, whatever those identity are, maybe it's your ability level. You know, if you know, whatever you bring to the table, recognize that other people are bringing things as well. And then we, as I've alluded to on multiple occasions, we want broad and diverse representation, underrepresented voices. Important to me is that these be really roles with agency, that if we, you know, for example, I offered up that school improvement council, but there are district level community teams that that includes family members and community partners. Are we really bringing people to the table as a checklist, or are we bringing them there with agency, that their voice matters, their opinions matter? Are we really giving them the opportunities to really do what we say on paper? Again, is this a compliance thing? We have to have families at the table, and so we have them. Or do we really want them and value them as important to those earlier outcomes that we started with: student achievement, equity for all kids? Building and valuing a supportive environment, recognizing that creating this school culture, one that's a systemic priority led by adults, and prioritizing issues of equity, inclusion, and diversity, that in order to do this work, we really have to value this ourselves. And so that early work around building community school and family partnerships is really the work that we do on ourselves, the work where we look at ourselves and say, do I really want this? Do I think it's a priority? And if I do, then how do I use all of those frameworks that I've just gone over to advance the work? Home versus school versus community norms and values, and everything is situationally appropriate. You know, I said I grew up in a family of 9. And so what I learned in my home was that if I wanted people to hear what I had to say, I needed to talk loud and interrupt and all those kinds of things. But of course, those were not the norms at school. And I will say I got lots of report cards that indicated that I talked too much and those sorts of things, because that's kind of the environment that I had grown up in. And I think some of my colleagues today might still say that I'm working on some of those skills of not interrupting and not over talking other people. But there are these dynamics of difference across cultures and understanding what's appropriate in different settings. And all of these are important to engagement. When, you know, kind of how kids are taught to respond to aggression. Maybe in the home, parents say, if your brother hits you, then you don't hit him back, you come talk to me. And at school, that probably fits pretty well with what the school might say. It's like, if there's some child hitting you, you don't hit back, you come talk to an adult. But maybe that same parent at home who says don't hit back might tell that same child, if somebody hits you down the street, then you fight back, and then you come home and tell me. So again, not saying, I think the whole point here is that we recognize that there are differences, and as PBIS would tell, we talk about the expectations in the particular situation that we're in and have appropriateness for those things. Again, the importance of these things as we talk about how we engage families. You know, if we engage in families, focus on discipline, then having these kinds of conversations and understanding these kinds of differences are important. Examining and valuing data for equity. And I'm not going to go into a large discussion here on equity issues, but again, so much of the school, family, and community engagement is around student achievement and student engagement and climate in the school. And much of that really ends up being issues around discipline. And discipline is often an issue that requires us to look at data. Some of the work that we're doing through the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina is really working with schools to look at data around disparities and inequities regarding kids with disabilities, kids with different Black kids, Black males, other ethnic groups, looking at the data. And if we're engaging our community and our family members in those conversations, then we can begin to engaging them with true agency, that they're not at the table just as a checklist, but they're actually part of the discussion around how do we begin to address things. And for me, that again is that value through which we begin to do genuine school, family, community engagement. Okay, so I've said a whole lot here. Again, my whole point is to encourage us to use a cultural lens, a lens that says, let's look at the differences in the norms of the communities that we're serving. To use a lens that said, we want the diversity in our school. We don't just want one kind of family in our schools. We don't have one kind of family in our schools. So how do we address ways to deal with the dynamics of difference? How do we work towards inclusion? Again, I think these are the things that we, the adults, whether we are a community partner, whether we're a teacher, whether we're an administrator, whether we're a mental health professional, that this work around school, family, community engagement begins with us acknowledging that we care about it in a way that we're willing to put some work in with ourselves to be open to address things more broadly. Comments?
It seemed to resonate, the idea or the construct of authenticity, authentic engagement. Yes, with a big exclamation point.
Thank you.
We've got an amen. Yes, I think everyone's got their arms in the air. Appreciate.
All right, well, great. Authenticity that's my goal. I think we need to live that way. If we're asking families to do something, how could we can't ask families to do what we're not willing to do. If we're not willing to share how we honestly feel about something, to build this trusted relationship and respectful relationship with families, because ultimately that's where all the challenge we have. That biggest challenge is that we reach out, they don't respond. They reach out and feel like your response didn't hear them. So we parent, we family, we community all have to be open to looking at ourselves and not expecting others to do more than we expect them to be better at this than we are. We have to be it. We have to be it. That sounds like a Bass logo.
I love it. You've got folks that are chiming in, Tricia, and just saying, absolutely, definitely resonating with that notion. And personally, I love your mom's comment on get it in your head because nobody can take it from you. I think that's really beautiful. So thank you.
Yeah, but she might kind of put her hand up here. So get it in that head.
I love it.
All right. So I have rolled through lots of slides here. I'm out of breath, and I appreciate all of you who have been supporting me by putting it in the chat, and know that I would have loved to sit around in a room with you to have this conversation, and I appreciate it. I want to move towards closure here, and put back up again, this definition that I really like so much. Engagement among families, schools, and the community is a shared responsibility. It reflects the many different ways in which families, community organizations, and schools engage with and support. I remember someone pointing out the word support one another to ensure that every child is academically successful. It is continuous throughout a child's life and happens everywhere children learn, at home, in school, and in the community. It supports the creation of pathways that honor the dynamic, multiple, and complementary ways that children learn and grow from cradle to career. That's that diversity lens right there. And it recognizes and encourages the role family and community play in advocating for educational quality and opportunity for all children. We all have a role. So yes, I love this definition. Any final thoughts on this before we kind of move on here to close out? So, I have been wanting feedback and you all have been giving it. I am asking you to tell me what is one, describe the work. One word, what's the work that's needed to fully realize authentic school, family, community engagement? But I don't really want you just to do that. I also want you to personally say, what can I do? How can I facilitate this? I think for me, I would say that the one word needed to fully realize authentic school, family, community, if I were typing in the chat, I would probably say, I probably would just underline authentic, that it needs to be real. And then how can I facilitate this? And I would say by being honest, honest when I reach out to a family, honest when I'm in a community meeting, that I'm not just speaking kind of what people expect, me in my role to say, but my understanding of the richness of the communities that we all live in, and being honest as we do that work. So any thoughts that you all have on that, please share.
So we've got folks saying collaboration. Oh goodness, now there's so much coming in, Tricia. All right, we've got collaboration, try and try again. I
love that one. Try and try again.
Be ourselves and share who we are with one another. Bring to the table. Understanding, reconnection with families. Clear communication. We like the phrase clear is kind. Trust, loving kindness. Build trust. Understanding and empathetic. Consistent and transparent. Relationship. Unconditional, not giving up on a family or student. Oh, these are lovely, y'all.
They are.
Yeah.
Wow. I just need to take a breath on that. Yeah, I say, yeah, amen. I agree. And we can do that because we just start with ourselves. We can do that. We can do that. All right. So, this is a Zoom presentation with slides. So, time, I think we're at time almost. So I put together my key takeaways from this session. You'll have your own. I'm not going to ask you to put those in the chat, but I hope you have some key takeaways that will facilitate you strengthening and building better or growing what already is there, engaging perhaps some families that you haven't worked so hard with, that try again, that loving kindness. So here are my key takeaways. You'll have your own. That I think that effective school, family, community engagement is anchored in culturally responsive processes and practices. That it has to be culturally responsive. It just can't be one way. It's dynamic and ongoing. There are going to be conflicts. There's going to be work. Keep trying, work at it. You have to put some data on the table to encourage family engagement. If it's just all talk, I think it's easy not to show up. But when you ask families and community members to help you address an issue, then I think you can get more involvement. Transparent about and clear about decision-making opportunity. Don't invite me to the meeting to help create the vision statement, but you really don't want me to help create the vision statement. That the vision statement is already created, and what you want from me is to give you feedback on it. So be clear about what you want from me. I'm happy to give you feedback on the statement that you've already created or the strategic plan that you've already done, but don't tell me that I'm coming to help create the plan when the plan has already been cleared. Okay, so I guess that's my need for mutual respect and trust, and that this work, if it's done well, benefits achievement for every child. So those are my takeaways. I hope you've got some takeaways from this today. It has been my pleasure to talk with you. I thank you so much for joining us today. And while I said you don't need to respond, I see Taylor's put up her poll. Feel free if there are some other comments you'd like to make. Again, thank you so very much. It's been my pleasure to talk with you and learn from you today. Thank you.
Tricia, thank you so much for today's presentation. It was fantastic. This is the level of engagement that the community had today was fantastic. I think it's very much akin to what we're trying to model in terms of the work around creating these collaborative partnerships with our community, between our communities and our schools. So thank you for offering that educational experience. And as you shared, I did go ahead and post our final survey poll to glean some additional info from y'all. And let's see here. We've got some thanks to you, Tricia, for awesome presentations.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you.
Let's see. And some feedback for me and to the BASS team that number 2 is not working. Thank y'all so much. We will update the post-survey poll and hopefully y'all will join us for next month's webinar. We hold these series at the last Thursday of every month, and we make sure that the topics are relevant to all of our community partners and our family here in South Carolina and across the nation. I also wanted to point out a gentle reminder and an excited reminder that registration for the 2022 Southeastern School Behavioral Health Conference is live and open. If you would like to see Dr. Patricia Motes in person, please join us at the Southeastern School Behavioral Health Conference. And if you would like CEUs from today's presentation, you can email us at BASC, B-A-S-C, at mailbox.sc.edu. And of course, check out all our social media, our website. We would love to engage with you more fully. Tricia, again, thank you so much. You've got a lot of thank yous coming in the chats.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for participating with me. And thank you, Taylor, for helping guide me through it. Appreciate your leadership here. Thanks, everybody. It was a pleasure.
Always. Y'all have a lovely evening. Thank you again. Bye, Tricia.
Bye.